serve our country in a more effective way. We thank you, God, that you have given vision to your people to lead and to guide. We thank you, God, for them, for being able to hold our meetings for the past weeks with different groupings discussing the plan for this whole country of Montserrat. And that was done successfully with the input of all those who were there for such discussion. And here we meet now, God, today for final discussion, God, with the group. Being here, God, to give their own presentation on behalf of these groups this morning. We depend on you now, God, and for your guidance, for your intervention, for instructions. As you have called us all, God, to serve in this way, that those of God who will speak on behalf of not only the groupings, but also of our country. To find new ways of God and to serve, for this country of Montserrat can grow from strength to strength to make a difference in our world today. So our country will be prepared for our next generation, where all can be included in our planning. As we meet God today, may we all be open, God, to instruction. Give us all that spirit of openness, that sense of purpose, that sense of vision, that sense of honesty. Holy Spirit, fill this place now by your presence. Saturate our mind and our heart, to God, now with your Holy Spirit. All that we do or say here this morning will help God, our country to be a better place. Bless God, the chair, as you have called her, God, to serve in this way. The guest speaker will be here as well to lead into your hand. With every aspect of this, our meeting this morning. Be with us and lead us now and forevermore. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Louis Charles. And we know that Reverend Louis Charles is the chair of the Montserrat Christian Council and the superintendent minister for the Methodist Church in Montserrat. He was also a very active participant in the Human Development Workshop earlier this week. So general welcome to everyone to this, our sensitization and validation workshop for the new Sustainable Development Plan. You may ask, why are we here today? We are here because we are on the journey towards the development of a new Sustainable Development Plan for Montserrat. I'm sure everyone is familiar by now with this document, and as it notes, it concluded in 2020. It ran for the period 2008 to 2020. It was the third Sustainable Development Plan for Montserrat. So we are now embarking on the journey to develop our fourth plan. Our first plan was developed in 1998 and ran until 2002. The second, 2003 to 2007. The third, the just concluded plan, 2008 and to 2020. Earlier this week and last week, we had several sector workshops. They were all based upon the 4 outstanding goals and I'm saying outstanding because we are at the point where we need to determine whether or not we are going to be continuing or we are going to be revisiting and revising those goals. So each workshop was based upon one of those goals. We are going to be sharing with you throughout the day the outputs of those workshops, and we are going to be seeking validation of those outputs. We have online viewing, and we will be inviting comments from the diaspora as we go along, closer to the end of the day and in the early part of the sessions. So this is simply an introductory session for what will come later on, which will be a participatory involvement of all persons here and our wider Montserrat, wherever they are. To help us to achieve what we have set out to do in terms of producing a new development plan, we have on island Mr. Trevor Spence, who is the facilitator and consultant for this phase of the project. It's a one-year project, which we hope will conclude next year around this time. And from January, the second phase will commence. We had quite an active set of workshops this week, and later on today, what you will hear presented, we have persons here from the various workshops who will be presenting the vision, the current reality, and the action plan as they discussed in their groups. And they are just a plethora of thoughts right now, which we will be sharing with you. So we are hoping that you will be able to spend the day with us as we seek to validate those outputs. I am the chair of the Oversight Committee, as I had mentioned, and the role of that committee will be to ensure that the process is a quality process, because we want to know that at the end of this, the results are valid and they are reliable, and that they will point to exactly what we want them to do. The SDP, the Sustainable Development Plan, was devised as a tool to be the basis of an integrated planning approach. So it's a link for national development, for the public and private sector, all activity on both ends to ensure consistency in terms of planning, policies, strategies, efficiency in the use of funds to ensure the right impact and desirable outcomes. Just for a little bit of information, the first SDP in 1998 came at the heels of what we had before as a country policy plan. So prior to that, we did not have any SDPs, but we had plans that were mainly focused on what the policies were that we would be looking at for development. The SDP took that a step further and integrated the participatory approach, which that was not the case with the country policy plan. And we would all know that budgetary aid started in 1996. That's after the volcanic eruptions. So prior to that, on the recurrent side, Montserrat was self-sufficient. We were able to gain capital funding and use that for projects, implementation of projects. So I mentioned that throughout the week we had several workshops, and we had very active participation to the extent where we recognized that we had some persons who we thought would be good champions for this process. I am now going to invite 3 persons who participated in those workshops to give just their brief perception and encouragement for persons overseas, as well as those of us here and listening and viewing, they will be reflecting upon their participation and what it means to them. So I'm inviting to the podium, in this order, Mr. Marjorie Weeks, Miss Vinaya Bass, and Mr. Norman Castle, to share with us their reflections in terms of their participation in the process. Welcome to the podium, Mr. Weeks.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Marjorie Weeks, and I was asked to be a youth representative on the Sustainable Development Plan Committee to not only to be a bridge between the young people in communicating their views and perspective on the process, but also making them more knowledgeable on what it is about and their views. To be honest, when I was asked to take up the role, I was not very knowledgeable of what the development plan was about, but through the workshops and the process thus far, I learned that this is a document or a tool, as Ms. Eswick would have said, that outlines the vision of the people of Montserrat and the direction in which we want to see the island go. And it also defines the strategies in which we would take about reaching this vision and achieving this vision. So this morning, I was talking with one of my classmates, and she was even telling me that she was not aware of what the plan was until she heard the jingle on the radio. So I am convinced that I have a role to play as a youth representative in not only communicating the views of the young people, but also making them more knowledgeable of the process and making them more knowledgeable of the process of the development plan. So yeah, I want to encourage not only young people, but everyone on island to be cooperative and help us to help you to help Montserrat. So, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I took a slightly different approach to Maldrick. I kind of gave a reflection on the day, so I'll just read what I wrote. So my name is Vinaya Bass, and I'm a member of the Montserrat Sustainable Development Plan Steering Committee. On the 16th of November, I attended a demonstration workshop that was facilitated by Mr. Trevor Spence. During the half-day workshop, we were introduced to the methodology that will be used throughout the Sustainable Development Plan's consultative process by using a real-time demonstration. Our team focused on the development of a robust communication plan to sensitize the citizens of Montserrat about the new MSDP. Mr. Spencer kicked off the day by getting us to visualize and brainstorm the things that we would like to see in place over the next year in relation to communicating the new MSDP to the people of Montserrat. This first session helped us to establish our collective vision for the future of the island. Next, we were encouraged to discuss the island's current reality, its accomplishments, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges, and the ways that stakeholders will need to work in order to effectively communicate and implement the new MSDP. This helped us to be clear on the island's weaknesses and threats, but it also allowed us to explore our strengths and opportunities too. By the end of the workshop, we'd also created a strategic action plan and calendar of events. And during the final session, we identified the specific, practical, and priority actions that need to be undertaken over the next year to communicate the new MSDP to the people of Montserrat. Overall, it was a pleasant learning experience. Mr. Spence's knowledge of Montserrat, delivery of the sessions, the methodology adopted for training, and the training materials provided us as course material was in line with my expectations, and I'm sure that they were rated as highly valued by the other participants. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the team for including me in the public consultation of the new MSDP, and I look forward to reading the new plan and witnessing its implementation. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Okay. This morning, I was asked to give some reflections on the process thus far. But I just want to give a little background for myself in the sense of saying how I've been involved in this as being a part of the steering committee for the STP. Now, I've been involved in the STPs from even as early as dealing with the country policy plans, going through every single one of the STPs so far, which Ms. Weeks spoke about. And coming in the last week or two, it was almost like deja vu, going back through this process. But not from the sense of seeing it in a negative way. I was very excited to be a part of this process again, understanding the importance of this whole process. But what I want to specifically mention is the role of the private sector. Because in a sense, as I expressed to some of my colleagues, was the absence to some extent of several more persons from the private sector. And as I come here this morning and I look around the room, it's again a significant proportion of public servants. But one of the things I was reflecting on this morning, I know that several of the public servants here have informal businesses. So they are actually business folk among us. And it is critical because this process, it's about the development of Montserrat. And it is the private sector who's going to play a very critical role. And as we go about looking at the plans and development of Montserrat, as we reflected on the various aspects within this process and how we went through, I wouldn't go into a lot of that because Ms. Bass just gave you the whole process. But it's important to understand, because I'm here as a private sector representative, and I want to reflect on the importance of the private sector in this process. And as we work together, it is important that we build the pillars and the infrastructure to ensure that the combination of public and private sector achieves the overall objectives. And I was very pleased within the process to see over the last few days the mechanisms that were used in terms of developing consensus, even in terms of bringing back Mr. Trevor Spence, who I worked with on the previous sustainability plans. And so, to enlighten the public, I can say that the process was a really good one. At times we had really, what should I say, very invigorating discussions. And a lot of things are coming out. And even sometimes some persons were referring that there was some extent of failure with the Sustainable Development Plan as to some of the objectives. It was refreshing to see that we have achieved several things. And what is important, underlining all of this, is how we can learn from the experience of what has gone for the last couple plans and their implementation. How are we as a people going to make the difference in retooling, re-engineering, re-strategizing to achieve the objectives that we want to see as we accomplish that vision that we will maybe tweak or redefine as we go forward in this process. So I want to encourage all who are here and those who are listening, please to be a part of this process. It is too important. Sometimes I get a little bit passionate about these things, but it is too critical for us as a people in terms of our development that we don't make a meaningful contribution. So I am here. I think one of my objectives here today is to encourage as many persons to be part of this process. please. I know sometimes a lot of us, we are saying that we are busy in terms of our job functions and even in terms of the private sector. Because for a lot of us, when we come here for these sessions, we are not getting paid, we are losing money. But it is too important for our national development to take this process lightly. And a process has been laid out that is being said that we'll be accomplishing the SDP within the next year. I am making a wholesome appeal to one and all. And I was just really impressed by the contribution of Young Weeks, because it is the importance of having the young ones involved in the process. It is their Montserrat in the future. So we must allow them to be a part of the process to make the change that they want to see happen to this Montserrat. So that is my reflection on the process for now. I think later on we'll get into more nitty-gritties as to the private sector and the role that we all have to play. But I just want to close by just sending the reminder to one and all to make a meaningful input into this process. It is too critical. And I may say, while we are doing it, it is so exciting. Well, it has been for me so far. So come join us. Share the excitement. Share the possibilities of seeing our country develop. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Weeks, Ms. Bass, and Mr. Castle. And I'm sure you would support me in my thinking that we have three very relevant and committed ambassadors for our Sustainable Development Plan. And I'm hoping that you listen very carefully when Mr. Castle mentioned the word revisiting, re-strategizing, because one of the thoughts that is out there is that we are basically trying to redevelop. So we should be calling it a Sustainable Redevelopment Plan. So that's just an idea that I'm throwing out there. And just a reminder, because we're here today to discuss the vision, current reality, and what goals we should be pursuing in terms of the action planning. So our short vision was a healthy and wholesome Montserrat. We started out with 5 goals: economic management, environmental management and disaster mitigation, human development, governance, and population. So those are the 5 goals that we started out with. So that was just a reminder, and now we are moving swiftly into our next item on this opening session. And it will be a presentation of prizes by the Montserrat Arts Council, which will be followed by a performance by the winner of the SDP jingle. The SDP jingle, there was a competition, and I'll let Ms. Charlene Lindsay speak some more about that. So I'll invite her now to the podium to tell us some more. They'll be giving the prizes as well.
Thank you, Ms. Eswick. Good morning, everyone. My name is Charlene Lindsay, and I am the Cultural Officer at the Montserrat Arts Council. A little insight into the jingle competition. We were actually contacted by the Ministry of Finance and asked for some assistance in putting the jingle competition out to the public. We were very excited, to say the least, to partner with the Ministry of Finance on this little, well, it's big because it's $3,000, not little at all, right? On this project, something that we would have had experience in doing because we've done jingle competitions and that kind of stuff before, but never having partnered with the Ministry of Finance. So that in itself was a little milestone for us. We would have had some 5 entries into the jingle competition. There was also a logo competition. The first place won $3,000, and there was a second prize of 15. Ms. Johnson, 15? 500. And the director has informed me that the Montserrat Arts Council will be taking on the responsibility of actually presenting consolation prizes to the other 3 participants. It was not mentioned before, but we think that going to a studio, being that we work at MAC and work with artists and work with creatives, we know that going to a studio costs money. And it's not always easy putting your art out there for others to judge. So just as an act of encouragement and to, you know, put something back into their pocket, we will be presenting consolation prizes to the other 3 participants who did not place. In saying that, it was nice to hear Maldrick speak about the SDP jingle and how his classmates actually learned something about the Sustainable Development Plan just by hearing the jingle. So I would say that the job is being done. And from all accounts on ZJB and the ladies at the office, the public was very much into the voting and the judging, and they enjoyed that segment of it. Having them judge, they may not have realized, but they had to pay attention to the SDP jingle in order to judge. You might have just voted for your friend, yes, but by listening to all 5 of them, whether you wanted to or not, subconsciously, you would have learned something about the Sustainable Development Plan. So, I won't take any more time, and just to acknowledge Miss Yannick Jarrett. She placed 2nd. You want it? No? Let's give her a little bit of time to come down. We had creatives who we know are like on the soca scene or in the calypso scene, and who would have presented and given us music. We hear their music on the radio before. But this young lady, I want to say, has never been...
No, I've entered a competition, similar ones, but that was back home.
Back in Jamaica?
Yes.
Right. So it's the first time hearing a lot of people calling the office and asking, who's jingle number 4? Who's jingle number 4? And we didn't actually put names to them because we didn't want that to hinder anybody's or influence their voting. So nobody knew. The technicians at ZJB, the radio announcers, nobody knew who was number 1, who was number, unless of course you're familiar with their voice. But number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4, and number 5. And Miss Yannick was number 4. Congratulations to you. Thank you. And of course, the first place winner, jingle number 1, Samron Woodley, also known as 9. He is a local artist. He is no stranger to the stage, the studio performances, and that kind of stuff. You want to say anything, Sam?
Good morning, everybody. I just want to say thanks to everyone who voted for the jingle. Even wasn't for my producer, I wouldn't have entered the jingle because I'm not a person that feel like a jingle person. But he always said, you know what, just explore the avenues and keep doing what you're doing. So for the SDP plan, I want to say it's a good initiative. Just keep it up, and I hope that it's really push forward and make a change.
Thank you very much on behalf of the Montserrat Arts Council. Thank you, as Amran said, thank you for voting. Thank you for taking part in helping us to determine who won the jingle competition. And to our panel of judges, thank you as well, because the vote was 60% public and 40% judges vote. That was the Sustainable Development Plan jingle, and thank you.
Thank you, Charlene, on behalf of the Montserrat Arts Council. And as per our program, we will now have a performance by Mr. Woodley, 9.
Yeah. Build it. Whoa. 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 Yeah, yeah. For a better tomorrow, there must be a plan. Like a house we building up from the foundation. A stable and lighted community, hope you understand. Accountability and a viable population. Bring back agriculture, more private sector. Yeah. Education opportunities for you and me. Adequate housing, tourism striving. Yeah. Adequate and affordable transportation for you and me. For a better tomorrow, there must be a plan. Like a house we building up from the foundation. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Awesome, I think. And it's catchy. I think even our little children from there will be singing it. It's already stuck in my head. Okay, so we are at the end of our introductory aspect of today's activities, and I'm inviting Dr. Burns, who is currently the interim SDP focal point working out of the Ministry of Finance. She will give the vote of thanks.
Good morning, everyone. I thought this was the simplest task, but I'm not sure. I want to begin by thanking everyone, all of you, for participating in the process so far. We heard we've been having some very lively discussions throughout the past couple of days and weeks, and I know this is a signal of what's to come, especially after that jingle, right? Many persons, each of us playing our different roles, valuable roles, must contribute to the development of the new Montserrat Sustainable Development Plan. We had, as I mentioned before, participants who attended the 4 workshops, and the staff at the Ministry of Finance, especially Ms. Dion Semple, Ms. Tamisha Hazel, Ms. Stephanie Ogaro, and Mr. Silford Moore Jr. I would also like to thank our volunteers who came in at last moment to help us, Ms. Vanique Fenton and Ms. Althea Allen. Thank you very much. Special thanks to the Montserrat Christian Council, especially the chair, Rev Louis Charles, for this morning's prayer. I'd also like to thank our able chair of not only of the Sustainable Development team, but also this morning's session, Ms. Maureen Eswick. And the reflections, weren't they great? Especially, no, I'm biased. Mr. Marjorie Weeks, Ms. Vinaya Bass, and Mr. Norman Castle, they were all good. Different, but good, and I think they met the objective of getting as many people as possible on board. Special thanks also to the Montserrat Arts Council, Mr. Silcott and his team, for collaborating with the Ministry of Finance, the Policy and Planning Unit, on the jingle competition. Also ZJB and all the participants who called in and voted. And Mr. Woodley, Samron 9 Woodley. And your manager, your writer, I think I saw him around, Mr. Watts. Thank you very much. The media, especially GIS, thank you very much for helping us and assisting us with this process. I'd also like to thank Yvonne and Amanda, the Montserrat Cultural Centre. We worked them a lot this week, last week, and they're still smiling. Thank you very much, Yvonne and Amanda. Once again, I hope I didn't leave anyone out, but thanks to everyone, each and every one of you, those here physically in Montserrat and who are listening to us. Thank you very much.
Okay, we are now going to start the second part of today's activities, but just before, well, introducing that aspect of it, I'm going to invite Mr. Trevor Spence, our facilitator, for the phase 1 and for today's session. And just a reminder that we have our viewers online, and we are inviting them to stay with us for the remainder of the day.
Sound very, not all yet here. Good morning to everyone. Okay, I love that part of it. When I listen to the three presenters, I feel like I have succeeded in working myself out of a job, right? Because they have the methodology down. What we'll say, Pat, you use that word? You have it down precise. While we're switching that, I'm going to encourage as far as possible those who are with us there are some extra seats and extra table there that we want everybody in the workshop setting to be participating in the discussions who are here. So I'm encouraging you to move towards one of the tables, please. And we welcome those who are online also, and we'll find ways of keeping those engaged. Let me take a reality check. How many persons here have been to, well, let me tell you, there have been 6 sessions. There was one with the steering or oversight committee, and you heard about the live demonstration workshop. There was one with the LegCo, you call it, the legislature. And then there were 4 sector workshops based on the 4 goals. Ms. Eswick mentioned that in the last Sustainable Development Plan, as you have it, there were actually 5 goals. And that was my first trip in 2007, 2008 to facilitate that process. The 5th goal was population. At the mid-term review, which I also had the privilege of sharing in, was that the debate on population continued, and the view was that that was of utmost importance, so that instead of having one goal on population, the decision was that all the other 4 remaining goals would have a cross-cutting relationship to population. Now, we are looking at this plan expired in 2020, but circumstances, including COVID-19, put back the consultations. And I'm happy to see the turnout today, and we are at the maximum because we are trying to keep within the regulations that are required according to, and Montserrat have been doing extremely well to keep COVID-19 under control. And the debate has now continued about what to do with population. The methodology was nicely laid out to you, for you. And I'm good. So that makes my life a little easier. That we start with what is easier to build consensus on. What's our destination? And that's also part of the visioning that we're doing. How long will this new sustainable development plan be for? Having determined where we want to go, we then come back to where we are and explore what we call in the methodology the current reality. What have we done well, accomplished in the 2008 to 2020 plan? What are the weaknesses or the non-accomplishment? Is the second box of the current situation. What did we set out to do, and what did not happen? And there might be justifiable reasons for that not happening. The third one is opportunities or trends. Since the plan was done in 2008, are there new opportunities that we should take on board? Are there trends happening in Montserrat, in the Caribbean, in the wider world that we need to pay attention to as we develop the next stage of the plan? And the fourth box is, whether you want to call them challenges, threats, or issues, is what can stop us from achieving this vision? What are the obstacles? What we have to surmount? Having determined where we want to go, having addressed where we are, there is something missing. It's the journey to get there. And really the plan is that journey. A set of actions that will take us from where we are to where we want to go. And those actions are generally part of the current reality. What you have accomplished, you can determine whether you want to continue some of those things. What you have not accomplished, are those things still relevant? And should we still be setting out to trying to achieve those? The third one is that you have identified the opportunities and trends. Should there be a series of actions that will take those opportunities on board? And finally, even among your challenges, there should be some actions to say, what are the actions to minimize the challenges or even to help eliminate the challenges? And that goes to the action plan. So today, what we are about, and one, we're not starting from scratch. We have this. Secondly, so let me just get, it might almost be easier to ask, who have been to any of the sessions, 6 sessions that were held before? You can just give an indication. Put them up straight. The people are in line today want to see that you have been consulted. Right. And they are spread at different tables. Easier to say who is coming to their first session. So let's see the hands. Anybody come in? 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. 5. Right. We want to make sure that not everybody who is coming for the first time, because Dr. Burns, there's a table with 2 persons coming from the first time. If we can do a little bit of, can we just note who is coming for the first time from a table there? 2 persons. So if we can spread it a little bit differently. Right. So, not starting from scratch. 4 groups did some work. In your folders, we are starting with the visioning exercise. And beside the agenda, I'm going to just ask you to go in your folders and list. There's what is called worksheet 3. List that as 1 so that it's easy for you to follow. And the 5 worksheets or handout are listed in order of those 5 on the worksheets. So there's 1 on national visioning, can list that as 2. The vision pillars as 3. The national values as 4. The national development goals as 5. And the duration of the new plan you can list as 6. So firstly, what I'm going to ask in the order is, and if you pay attention and make your jottings, for workshops, the persons who are about, we're only going to highlight the visioning part, which is what is in those 5 boxes. And you can make your jotting on the relevant workshop as you listen to. So we are looking at validating, getting your additional input at this session. So who is going to bring us, let's do them in the order that the goals are listed. Economic development. I think for want of ease, we want the persons to use the mic. Yeah, so there's a mic here, and so the person who is going to share with us very briefly the economic development. Can you just go to the mic and share with us? Is the person here for economic development? For the visioning? Oh. Please make your jottings.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I am presenting for the economic team. We met on Tuesday of this week. So please forgive me if I don't do justice to what was discussed. However, I see members of the team here. In our deliberations, we had Linda Diaz, Ann Thomas, Blondel Agaro, Baldwin Taylor, Hajinder Jotto, Martin Parlett, Norman Castle, Joseph Agaro, Usman Sow, Angela Greenaway, Hazel Riley, and Violet Selcott. Essentially, we started our discussions, and what was highlighted was the need for constant monitoring and evaluation of the Sustainable Development Plan, as well as making the plan more fluid and less static. There was also a concern on quality assurance in terms of the data that is used to measure the indicators or the goals to get to the vision that is identified. It was also suggested that we should make use of the lessons learned from the current Sustainable Development Plan. There was also a slight concern with our government cycle and the inclusion of the SDP in our plans, or the plans for the government and people of Montserrat. However, we took comfort in the fact that the policy framework comes from the SDP, as well as our strategic objectives should or must be tied to the Sustainable Development Plan. In terms of the specific questions that we looked at in terms of the national vision and the feedback, we thought that there was slight tweaking is necessary. There was a bit of concern with some of the terms that are included and perhaps might not be inclusive of all persons. There was also a general concern that perhaps the vision does not speak to the bold and brightness of Montserrat, or speaks to what Montserrat is about or what we want to accomplish. Across our groups, we also felt generally that the use of the term God-fearing, perhaps we may need to reconsider. In terms of the pillars, the general consensus here was perhaps we need to refocus and rethink these, in that perhaps these are more like objectives and perhaps can be a bit distracting from the overall vision. Let me also try to explain that a little bit more in terms of what the conversation was around, which was pretty much that our values are more pillars, and whether they need to be consolidated or reviewed to see if there are valuable outcomes associated to them. I think that was the consensus. And question 3, with regards to the national values in the SDP, we thought that perhaps these can remain as is. We had one group that thought that perhaps it's very narrow, however, also very easy to understand. Just a question, in terms of worksheet 4 and the accomplishments, opportunities, weaknesses, do I list all? Okay. So it's just the questions that I'm supposed to answer? Questions
the 5 areas.
Okay, I think I've answered 3.
Right.
4. Okay. So the national development goals feedback, do you believe that these national goals in the new SDP, there was some mention of the need to add social development. There was also suggestions that economic management and development should be, well, we perhaps can relook management to economic development, as well as the splitting of environmental management and disaster mitigation. There was a thought that perhaps we need to also be working towards financial independence as a goal. We questioned whether or not population really needs to stand on its own. We do take the point that it was considered at some point, but subsequently changed. With regards to population, we had a very lengthy discussion with regards to our younger population and why perhaps Montserrat is not considered the ideal place for them to stay after completing education.
Right, and then the fifth area is on how long, the duration of the sustainable.
Right. And that question, our group, in general, we were between 15 to 20 years. However, there was a thought, however, that we should review in 2030 in line with the 2030 agenda, also with periodic reviews, 3 to 5 years, I think the general consensus was.
Thank you very much. While social development is going to come, I'm going to ask you just to highlight what might be different from that. Because of power outage, we got started a little later. If you look in your agenda, I'm going to try to get back on track, so do a little bit of shortcut, that we have a break at 10:30. Don't want to be too late with that one because the day is packed. And then lunch between 1 and 2, we are hoping to keep online. So we're asking each of the presenters if they could condense it in 3 minutes. Is that it? Not showing anything at you, sir.
It's all right. I'll do my best, right? Good morning, everyone. So the Human Development Group met on Monday the 22nd. Participants at that meeting, Inez Thompson, Stephanie Chewitt, Billy Darrow, Duflin Chewitt-Kernan, Carly Pico-Williams, Jenzel Skerritt, Gilmore Williams, myself, Althea Allen, Lydia Parlett, and Mrs. Florence Griffith-Joseph, as well as Pastor Louis Charles and Clarice Yearwood. With regards to the first section that we are to respond to, of course, I had the teachers, so there were some grammatical recommendations and a call for the vision to be a little bit more brief. Time was spent discussing friendly, vibrant community and a call for more national pride, community spirit, and addressing the need to be unapologetically Montserratian in the vision. Discussion was held around enterprise, the use of the word, and whether we should blatantly say business development. And I know you said don't repeat, but I think it's interesting and we should raise that. We also had a discussion around God-fearing society and whether that should be big G, small g, removed, or be more inclusive. Discussion was held also around the concept of our people and whether or not the expectation is to come and be a subsection or come and integrate and adapt, and what does our vision statement say? Recognizing the challenges of our cultural strength and how do we institutionalize being Montserratian or understanding the culture and the heritage. And where national actions needed to take place, whether in community, education. Comments and discussions included, and I just want to highlight this, whether or not your early childhood teachers should all be Montserratian to ensure that culture is integrated from an early point of view. That level of discussion was held, according to Mr. Castle. Some hot conversation, right? We discussed youth and their consciousness about the vision, and making sure we have explanations and examples of what we are looking for when it comes to Montserrat. So I think that addresses your number 1. Regarding the pillars, there's a call to make sure that environment and sustainability stands alone. We note the absence of ICT, but also in discussing ICT, making sure it's phrased in a way that it's inclusive, and we don't just think of computers and data, but innovation rather in farming, fishing, all industries. Additions or updates to the housing statement to say adequate and affordable housing. There was a call for an update on the statement around educational opportunities to make sure that it's directed to include not just the traditional academic, but vocational and technical. Some discussion was held around the use of the word tolerance and diversity, and a conversion to perhaps diversity and inclusion. And we also talked about public safety. I'll leave the discussion around disaster management for Mr. Darrow and Mr. White. We also note that the vision pillar around tourism had a lot of elements in the bracket, and whether or not that should be in that format or some of those needed to be pulled out independently. So that takes us from pillars into values, kind of a blended discussion there. With regards to the goals, the main statement was around having them maybe a little bit more directed. So for example, like Ms. Truitt said, economic increase or growth and management, as opposed to the statements giving some direction there. Finally, in the section 5, duration, there were 2 lines of thought. There was one that said perhaps 20 to 30 years in the duration going forward. Or the other reality is that the UN Sustainable Development Goals end in 2030. And should we then just really be looking at matching that for now and then updating, knowing that a lot of our funding frameworks follow UN and then how they hold the UK accountable and in turn provide aid to us.
Thank you very much. You will recognize as the third group come forward, the environmental and disaster mitigation group, that the discussions were very rich, very detailed, and so there's a lot to share. We get the third report.
Good morning, everybody. Did I hear myself? Okay. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm really happy to be participating in this program or this effort. Okay. Let me start with saying who our team members were. We had Mr. Alwyn Pontin from Fisheries, Emmy Aston, environmentalist, Stephen Menz, environmental department, Ajami White, same department. Did I pronounce your name properly? Billy Daru, Youth Affairs. At that time, I was wearing another hat as well. Thousland Galloway, Environmental Health, and Wendy Emma, Environmental Health. We had Deirdre Allen, Montserrat Utilities Limited. John Jeffers, Turtle Conservationist. Shelley Isles, Land and Survey Department. Norman Castle, Private Sector Representative. Kelvin White, Disaster Management. Vegan Dawe, Montserrat Utilities Limited. Sheldon Carty, Montserrat Fishers and Boaters, and Tiffany Williams, Environmental Department. I'll just repeat that the discussions were really robust. So on the National Vision feedback, I'll just tell you, we had the discussion from more than one occasion that it should be amended and should fit in with the Sustainable Development Goals. And of course, that information was supplied to us where there was some sort of effort to align the Montserrat plan with the Sustainable Development Goals. Some persons thought it would stay as it is. We considered slight changes, which include environment and security and environmentally friendly Montserrat. We spoke of resilience. It became a hot topic because somebody introduced that resilience for Montserrat can be, we use the word ticklish, in the sense that it has been used, people consider it being used as an excuse for not doing. Montserratians are resilient, so it's an excuse from who's concerned not to do, and that Montserrat will just get on. So we thought of it. Coming from that, we realized that some words probably needed a definition, and this was reinforced throughout the discussion. There was a bit of education where climate mitigation means something different from climate change. It was. Stephen Menz will assist me if I went wrong on that piece of the report. On the pillars, We realized that adequate housing needs to be defined. I think it mentioned adequate housing in words, but one of our members' studies should be defined, not just as numbers, but as standards. It should include standards as opposed to just numbers. We question whether we should be using the word climate change based on a discussion and contribution from Stephen Menz, whether we should be using climate change, change adaptation, or other things, but we should probably consider what the global picture is before we decide on what we put finally in the document. Somebody thought that some of the pillars were too broad and would need either splitting or redefining. National values, some persons thought they should remain as is. There was a question about what defines us as a people, which you would have heard my predecessor speak about from another group, which I was part of. And what is our indigenous right? And the question came from that was, do we have indigenous Montserratians? It got to be a bit warm, but it's something to discuss. Actually, there's a word here, there's a line there that says, we need to define indigenous if we were to use the word. There was the question of, do we keep respect for God, a small g or capital G, or find something that is more inclusive to reflect what Montserrat is now and what it may be in the planning period. And one suggestion for it to include religion or religious beliefs, and also in the same vein, consider other developments, gender, sexuality, and race, as part of the plan going forward. This again was a bit warm. We spoke of the fact that ECLAC is doing the supporting Montserrat government to align, because a question came about alignment again, and we were reminded. Montserrat's culture, we have a lot of values. Are we losing our core values, and what are our core values? This one was a bit, the person who brought up this one, he was a bit, not warm, but very vocal about it. I think quite a few people in the room got quite heavily involved in that discussion. And some things we call values we should maybe capture and retain, or document and retain, would be greetings, our manners, because it makes us unique. We had some discussion on this. Then national development goals. We thought that one of them should be separated, environmental management and disaster management. We strongly agreed that it should be separated. And if I may say, at another group, we thought so as well. Maybe add another pillar or something to that effect. And there was a contribution to include climate adaptation and mitigation. That's under the environmental side. And I think there was one about safety. It was further up, I think, safety and security, where we had law and justice. Public safety and security was not mentioned in any document. So we thought that public safety and security could probably include disaster, risk reduction, and mitigation. And we thought for the duration at number 5, 15 years to cater for possible implementation delays, but ensure that there are structured midterm or term reviews.
Thank you.
Stephen Menz, of course, would have to speak more on the environment side.
I just wanted to make the clarification of climate mitigation and disaster mitigation. Climate mitigation basically has to deal with achieving net zero or being carbon neutral or lowering your footprint, whereas disaster mitigation has to do with being preventative putting in preventative measures to prevent disasters and ensuing what we call grief. So you have to be able to separate the two. So that is one thing like that. And I think there was one other thing when we had sustained integrity, those three things that always come together. Accountability, integrity, and the other one. We think that should be one.
Collapse
into one.
Thank you. All right. Several times the discussion while we wait for the governance person to come forward will mention about warm, robust, and all of that. It wasn't the temperature in the room that we're trying to capture, but the discussion, but it was towards consensus building. So it wasn't, I didn't have to get some boxing gloves for anybody because everybody was, had a passion for what they wanted to say. Yeah.
Good morning, and thanks to you, Mr. Darrow and Mr. Mensah, actually encroaching on about 2 minutes of my time, so I will summarize and be very short so that we stay in tune with the timing. In terms of national vision, well, before I do that, let me just say who were in the group. We have Honorable Veronica Dorset Hector, Melissa O'Gara, representing the Permanent Secretary of Agriculture, Chevelyn Williams-Kernan, Chief Human Resource Officer, Colin Fergus, Permanent Secretary of Communications, Works, Energy, Labor, Paul Lewis, Leader of the Opposition, Honorable Shaina White, Speaker of the Legislative Council, Angela S. Wicks, Secretary of the SDP. We had Sharon Burns, SDP Focal Point Officer, and we had, yes, I think that's it basically. On the vision, there's some of us who thought that the vision was okay, basically. There are others who thought that it was somewhat long-winded and that it needed to have a sense of national pride when you read it, when you hear it, and somehow a sense of embracing the Montserrat culture and a sense of some form of innovation. That was the comment. Basically, everybody agreed, however, on the need for the communication strategy, as it is the opinion that most persons, or some persons at least, do not have an idea what the vision is, and perhaps because it's a bit on the long-winded side, it's not so easy to remember naturally. In terms of the vision pillars, we had about some 13 vision pillars. However, only 2 per se that really jumped out at this group for concern. Persons thought that vision pillar number 5, a vibrant agricultural sector, that was not sufficient. They felt a better wording that captures the real intention of the pillar, a sustainable agricultural sector. I guess that's up for debate. In terms of vision 12, or vision pillar 12, accessible, comprehensive healthcare. This is always an area of contention, healthcare, and persons felt that somewhere quality should be inserted there. So that was basically the discussions in terms of the vision pillars. We had other discussions, but they weren't as, well, persons didn't think that they need to address those. And therefore, we went on to the national values. And we believe that the values are excellent, but however, we question whether or not persons in certain key positions practice them consistently, and insisted that we should embrace it as a culture to practice our national values more often, especially when we serve in an area where we have influence or decision-making capacity. In terms of the economic growth under national development goals, some persons, although they realize and appreciate the broadness of the management in terms of economic management, some persons still felt, notwithstanding, that they wanted to see something that reflect economic growth. So that was an area of contention for a while, and I would like to see what the final agreement is from the wider group. We had 4 national development goals, and within those goals, there's some element of infrastructure development. However, the group thought that a 5th goal could be the infrastructure development, and all the different elements from the other 4 goals could fit right under the infrastructure development. Like a previous grouping, population also was a temptation to include population there somewhere. And some of the discussions coming out of population, I guess because as we speak, the population is dwindling, and therefore the debate was vibrant. And one of the areas that we mentioned in terms of population is incentives for population growth. I guess that some of you here would have passed the time when you want to increase the population through birth, but there are others who still can do so, and they're saying they will not without incentives, and I agree with them. And you know what the incentives could be, and I fully support that. They could count on me for that one. In terms of retention of the population, they remind us, we had two members of parliament in the group, so we had to represent the politicians, so to speak. So they remind us that lip service will not do it in terms of retention of population, and that a reward system must be seriously considered and implemented. There's also the discussion of economic diversity, where you use broader range of economic activities and try and improve on what we basically depend on at the moment. We thought also that while we had lovely goals, achieving these goals had challenges, and some of these challenges came from the access to funding, and even when we are said to have funding, it's like an arm and a leg trying to get through the red tape. And by the time, no wonder that we saw that this Sustainable Development Plan could not be achieved, a number of the goals, because now I realize it's not only a political cycle for 5 years, you get not everything done, but also with the Sustainable Development Plan. So we were pushing for our funding agencies, I hope they're listening, or whoever is recording, send them a copy, that they are more practical in terms of how we engage each other and in terms of the timing of the funding. No, it makes any sense to be speaking long-winded and then fancy words and then no funding. Helps nobody. At the end of the day, we thought that capacity strengthening is important, but we do not want that we continue for the next 10, 15 years speaking about capacity strengthening without actually focusing on building the capacity of our locals. Because someday it's our sustainability plan, we want to be able to own it and implement it. In terms of the duration of the new, well, I don't know if it's really new, but the continued Sustainable Development Plan, some persons thought it should be a plan for 15 to 20 years. Some thought it should be a plan for 15 to 25 years. And let me just say why they said that. They said they don't want a plan to be political. They just want a plan to be a plan that's a national plan, and then whoever forms the government, follow the plan. So that was the point they're making. But they believe that monitoring is important over the first 5 years, and then you review. Some even insist on the SWOT method. And then the lessons learned should be included in the budgeting process, ensuring that it is possible to achieve the goals. However, we know that the budget is normally very limited. And from my experience, a lot of goals here, it's not possible to cover them in the budget. And therefore, simply, we're calling on the funding agencies that we do depend on to do less lip service and to be more forthcoming with funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. then you will understand that the reports that came to you is not the full length of the discussions of all 4 workshops. It used a 3-level methodology, a tool that individuals using a worksheet gave their ideas. Then in tables like how you were sitting, they discussed them, and then at a plenary, we took that. From the list you heard from the 4 workshops, there might be 40 to 50 persons who spent at least 2 hours in each session going through that. So we're not want to rehash that in the next 5 or 10 minutes. What we want you to do, and that would apply for persons online in the chat box, is just to note if there are any gaps in what has been presented. And you don't have to put your name on the 5 worksheets, but it would be important that if you have some feedback from what you have listened to, and you think that there are some gaps, or you want to reinforce any point, is to put them in. The methodology is about documentation also, so that you honor everybody who participates. So you notice that all of the 4 workshops are already well documented. And I'm only asking you to make my life a little harder, because then my job would be to synergize all of those that come to make sure that there is a seamless running of that information as to the 5 areas. But there are other stakeholders, including some who have been at the different workshops, who might have reflected on what one or other reported, and those who are coming for the first time, and those who are online that have listened to the 5 areas, that you want to make sure that you put it down, because the only way we will know of your thoughts if you use the opportunity to document it. And just in case, as we said, we're not going to go back through the methods of individual, group, and so on. We're looking at closing the camp. But if there are 1 or 2 comments from persons who something stand out for you, something that there are gap, we ask you just to go by the mic, say who you are, and make your point, right? So we'll allow a couple of comments, but please make sure that you don't have to put your name, unless you so desire, on the worksheets that you are turning in. It's only important to know that the ideas came out of the workshop. If you want to be identified and say, this is my particular passion, then fine. But the whole idea is to get your input. So from what you have listened, does anybody want to add a comment? Yes, please, just come by the mic.
Sorry, good morning. I'm not sure if I heard mention being made of a pandemic and where it would fit in this. I looked at the environmental management and disaster mitigation, but I'm not sure it fits there, and so I'm not sure where exactly it would fit. But I think that is important to note.
Right. And that did come up in both the current reality and the actions, but it might be useful as we think through where we want to go, because none of us know how long that is going to be with us and what overall limitations. So thanks for that point. Yes, please do it quickly. And there's one hand after.
Yes, just a reminder in terms of the environment that we also include in the marine environment, in addition to the terrestrial environment. And I think in our discussions, we were thinking about an idea for population retention or population growth is that we need to have recognition for the security of the elderly and a guaranteed social security system and national health insurance system for all. I think we missed that. So.
Yes, thank you. And just one other thing while you come is that later on, especially in the actions, the Economic Commission of Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLA, is a partner with the government of Montserrat in this process. And the word they use is localizing, but is how do you take on board the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and that will come up further. Yeah.
I think you have just preempted my contribution.
Yeah.
I'm Deborah Lewis. I'm the Director of External Affairs.
Yeah.
And from the different interventions that we heard so far, I think there's a common theme, and that the existing framework needs some kind of modifying in some way. So I am thinking that the proposed 5 goals are commendable in that they cover a range of substantive issues. But I think maybe one of the lessons learned from the existing SDP 2008 to 2020 is that they may have been too broad and general. Yeah. Here's where you preempted me. So I was going to say that the United Nations approved the 2030 Agenda, which contains 17 Sustainable Development Goals, also known as the Global Goals, and they are a call from the United Nations to all countries around the world to address common challenges that all of humanity faces, and to ensure that people everywhere have the same opportunities to live a better life without compromising our planet. I personally believe that these should form the core part of our new Sustainable Development Roadmap, which I see as a call to action to, borrow Maureen's, Mrs. Weeks' word, redevelop our economy, rebuild our population and society, and reconstruct key infrastructure in a sustainable way that protects the environment, conserves our natural resources, and guarantees the national well-being and prosperity of Montserratians. For funding purposes also, it makes sense to adopt these 17 goals, as it would make it easier for fundraising. We currently have a development funding gap for which the SDP will require even additional financial and other resources. We also have to look at the current reality in Montserrat, but also the current realities in the international development community, which is organized around these 17 global goals. And just to touch on some of the individual comments, I think that a number of different stakeholders and different stakeholder groups are going to need to play a critical role, not just the private sector, but the public sector and civil society as well. And a part of the SDP should be about how we translate these ideals, these development ideals into practice, so that it is not just a good planning exercise. I think our previous SDPs, they were really reflective of good planning and increased citizen participation. But I'm hoping for an SDP plan that would also carry with it maybe an action plan. So regarding the framework, I was thinking that maybe to simplify, because following on from even Siobhan's presentation, I agree. Well, not just her, but the others mentioned as well, that it might be a little bit cumbersome as it is, the SDP. So I'm thinking maybe we can streamline it into 3 pillars around development goals, a development fund, because we have to finance the plans that we have, and then a development action plan, which would include implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. Thank you.
Yeah. Quick comments, and then you're going to say something, and we'll take one final before we take the break. Yes, and I'm hoping that you have written that. Ms. George there is capturing some of the writing, but we want to make sure that we document all your feedback. Certainly, the current reality, as well as the action planning, has taken on board several of what you're saying. But is there a way to reflect the sustainable development, the goals issue of the UN, the broader thing, in the visioning? That's something that we have to consider. So thanks for that feedback.
Okay, thank you everyone again for your submissions. We have just completed the first part of the three-step process for today. That's the visioning. We will move into, after the break, which is coming up right after I finish speaking, we will be doing the current reality and then the action planning later on today, and they will close with the action planning. So we had the presentations from the 4 workshops so far, and I see we got some very good feedback from persons who are not part of those workshops, but who, having heard what came out of those workshops, have had some reflections and then some considerations as to what can we add to those thoughts from the 4 goal workshops.
And just a quick reminder, it's important that if you didn't have the opportunity to go to the mic, but you have some additional comments, we don't want to leave without having those. So put them on your worksheet, we'll collect them. All right?
Yes, because we're doing a thorough compilation of all the comments that we get. We are actually capturing those that are coming in online as well. And there will be a synthesis at the end of this process of everything that we have captured. And that will be shared with you again, of course. As I mentioned before, this is just phase 1. So all of you here, we're expecting to see you back in phase 2. We are also, at this point, going to cut the live feed, and we will resume that at 2 p.m. So persons who are looking at this online, we will resume at 2 p.m. Thanks for your contributions again. And the break is available outside.
Seeking your help to get us back on time. The break is outside, so if we can make sure we don't have too many meetings between the workshop and have the break and come back in as within the